Hey, I want to talk about another mystery of these Cronides that most people are not picking up on. And it has to do with Prometheus, who is Satan, who is Loki, who is Lucifer, the trickster, and so on. Now, if you're following my work, you know that he's also the Egyptian Set, and he was responsible for the death of Dionysus-Osiris, who is also Balder. And shortly after that, he was allegedly killed off and became known as Satan in the fraudulent religious system known as Semitic religion. You also know that Jehovah would be Zeus, the father of Dionysus-Osiris, Balder, so Zeus is also Odin. The story of these people is what I have been focusing on, and I have covered it in the Greek mythology, Roman mythology, Egyptian mythology, and so on. But there are more clues to these people in Nordic mythology, and it's a little tougher nut to crack, but with the key of the murdered son, you could start to put things together. Now, of interest to me is this painting by John Bauer called Loki Consumes a Roasted Heart. And what is this about? Now, you know from my research and my work that the whole mystery of the Osirian pharaohs has to do with Zagreus, the murdered child that came from the union of a father and daughter, Zeus and Persephone, and that either he or Semele ate the remaining heart in a potion to reincarnate the murdered toddler Zagreus into Dionysus. But here we have the same situation with Loki. And what is this about? What this is about is I'm beginning to dig into this Nordic poetic Edda and prose Edda and the Hemskringla, is that one of the wives of Loki was killed by the Cronides. And she went into the Aesir, which is the equivalent of Troy, and I've already proven that out in my work. Go to my site, hiddenhumanstory.com. It's got the quotes to prove that out. But the story is she came from the Vanir, and she was one of the wives of Loki, and she gave birth to 3 of his children. But she came down to the Aesir, which is Troy, and they say caused discord, and so they murdered her and put her on a pyre, and all that remained was her roasted heart. And there's variations in this story as well, that they couldn't kill her, and she comes back to life, and so on. There's always a symbolic variation, but this picture represents Loki retrieving the heart of his murdered wife and eating it to take in her essence, the same way that Zeus either ate or gave to Semele the remaining heart of Zagreus in a potion. Now, this is incredibly important because I believe this is the point that Loki, who is Prometheus, turned against his cousins because of this. And this caused the final rift. And I believe at this point it may have been something that motivated him to kill Dionysus-Osiris. Now, there's many things out there on the internet talking about her, that she was a witch. They refer to her as a witch that gave birth to 3 of his children. Her name is Angerboda, and she was referred to as the witch of Ironwood. Now, there may be other names that she has as well, but she gave birth to Fenrir, which is the wolf, and his sister who's known as Hel, and a brother who's a snake, represented as a snake. And from what I gather, it was Fenrir that kills Odin or Othin in Ragnarok. It is also interesting to note that there are some that are saying that Odin or Othin is summoning her up. It may be her that he summoned up to find out what was going to happen to his son, Dionysus-Osiris, or Balder, in the Gifaganen. So this is something I'm researching, and this dead spirit of this woman that he was trying to summon up wouldn't give him information. And in another part of the Poetic Edda, it gives a little bit more information about this situation that occurred in this Hinluthjoth. It goes on and it says, the wolf did Loki with Angbotha win, and Sleipnir bore he to Svantha Fari. The worst of marvels seemed the one that sprang from the brother of Bilistan. A heart ate Loki, in the embers it lay, and half-cooked found he the woman's heart. With child from the woman lopped soon was, and thence among men came the monsters all. The sea storm driven seeks heaven itself. O'er the earth it flows, the air grows sterile, then follows the snows and the furious winds, for the gods are doomed, and the end is death. Then comes another, a greater than all, though never I dare his name to speak. Few are they now that farther can see than the moment when Othin shall meet the wolf. Okay, so here it's basically saying he had children with the woman. Some people think that this is saying that he got impregnated with her children, which is not going to be possible. He's a man. So, however you interpret it, it's, it depends on how you see it. But the point is this is giving a clue as to what happened between the Prometheans and the Cronides. And it started to disintegrate with this woman who was his wife, Loki's wife, came in and allegedly caused some discord and went back or was murdered before she can go back. And her husband came and also ate the heart that he found, just as Zeus had done with Zagreus, and it began to drive a wedge between the Prometheans and the Cronides. And then what followed was the death of Dionysus-Osiris, who is Balder, and his other names. So this is, another clue into what happened with these people, and, how we got to a point of God and Satan. It's all based on this. And, my guess is she may not have liked the cults that they were spreading. It's hard to say. It's also possible, just based on what I have seen in all of the symbolism that goes back to Ashtaroth, who is the half-sister of Cronus. I have to wonder if she was a descendant of Cronus and Ashtaroth, because the Qliphoth has Ashtaroth in it. And I wonder if she was following some of these ways of Ashtaroth or Asherah and didn't like what she saw the Cronides doing and interfered with it, and they killed her, and that caused the rift between Prometheus. And then on top of it, if you continue further into the Nordic religion, Odin, Zeus, sent out his children to kill the children of Loki, who is Prometheus, and this woman. And from what I've gathered, they were successful at killing the girl and the son, represented as Hel and the Midgard snake, but they weren't able to kill the wolf. And from what I've gathered, the wolf, Fenrir, is the one that killed Odin, who would be Zeus. So whoever was left ruled. Now, I believe that the serpent race is the Promethean race, or any descendants of Ashtaroth, Prometheus, any of these red-haired people. And they were pretty much chased down around the world as well, and out of Egypt. I've talked about that before. Prometheus' set was red-haired, and they would taunt red-haired men tremendously in Egypt, forcing those people out. Although I do think some of the rulership came back. You know, they had Seti, the pharaoh Seti and Ramses were said to have red hair or blonde hair and take the name of Set. Now, it's interesting because every mythology that I start to cover just gives another piece of the puzzle. And I was thinking about the Katy Perry song Swish Swish, and I did a video on the symbolism there. But in her song, there's somebody saying in the background, do they know? They don't know. You know, what do they know? They don't know. Which is interesting because I wonder who's really giving these people all of these things to present. Do they really understand it? I don't think Katy Perry has a clue as to the depth of her symbolism. I think these puppets are told, you're going to do this, this, and this. The question is who's behind it. We know who owns the Hollywood and music industry and press and so on. I really don't have to say it at this point. And I do believe these high-up priests know darn well that their religion is a fraud, and they know who is who, because it's all encoded with their language and within their circles, and they keep it to themselves. They don't want women into any of these priesthoods or so on. And they've burnt books, and I've dealt with that in my Inquisition video. But the question is why? And we know it gives them power and money and all that, but it's also a giant ritual, because if you remember back from my Kabbalah video, they believe you have to go to hell and through the darkness to come up into the light. And this is, to me, just a giant ritual for them to come out and have their new world order with them ruling, and all of their little predictions of how many slaves each Jewish person's going to have, or whatever fantasies. You know, you've got all these different factions, and to me it's like the same thing. Luciferians talking about getting rid of the religions and coming to Lucifer, and then you've got these Jews talking about how they're going to rule the world and have slaves, and the Muslims believe they're going to rule the world and everybody's going to submit to Allah, and the Catholics believe they're going to rule the world and it's going to be a Christ kingdom, and it's going to be 1,000 years of an iron rod rule, which sounds pretty horrible, but only after a massive murder and kill-off, and then they have to rebuild into this Christ kingdom after, you know, billions have been slaughtered and horrible things, and then they're going to have the kingdom of God after 1,000 years of rebuilding. I mean, everybody thinks they're running the show with their version of it, and nobody's telling the truth. You know, these were people, and they fought anywhere from 12,000 to 25,000 years ago. I gave you that timeline, and you go to my website, www.hiddenhumanstory.com. I've got a lot of the quotes and book pages up there. But this is a very important other part of the story of the Cronides and what caused the rift. And they just cover this up. And I don't know, it's just, sometimes it's very frustrating to me how this has gone on for this long and how they get away with it, but I'm doing my part at least to bring it to light. That's it. Thank you.